Brought to you by PrayLatin.com, makers of prayer cards featuring complete English phonetic renderings of Latin pronunciation.
We here as Catholics, those of us who pay attention to Catholic prophecy, the approved messages of the Virgin Mary, the messages of saints and those on their way to formal canonization, that we should keep an eye on the skies. Father Malachi Martin was one of the primary figures in the late 20th century, warning people to keep their eyes on the skies, that you would see signs in the skies of the impending coming of our Lord, or at least the formal material chastisement coming to full fruition that seems to have been detailed in the message of Our Lady of Fatima. And Father Malachi Martin, as I will show you in probably next week or the week after, in numerous interviews talked about signs in the skies and how they would be something that would convict the soul of people. They would let every single human being on the planet know where they stood with God. And that wouldn't necessarily lead to very many conversions either, because hardened hearts with even a bright neon sign flashing in front of them may not have their hardened hearts softened to the love of God. That's a topic for another time. Directly related to this, there was something peculiar that happened in the Philippines late last week. It went a little places on social media and then disappeared from the stories. And I haven't seen any Catholic commentator talk about this, so we're going to talk about this now. We go here to a news site that is not typically friendly to Catholic things, and that would be to the Daily Mail, of all places. This is, again, a pretty hard left-wing news site. Bear that in mind when you hear this story. Headline: Biblical sign appears in skies over church after Mass. Absolutely remarkable. I'm going to skip down here so you can see this, what they're calling a biblical sign. This is a zoom in of a cloud. You'll get a better picture of it here as we go over the story. But that is, the parishioners said they thought that was Jesus appearing in the skies over them. To me, it actually, and my wife agrees with me, I showed her this, agrees this looks more like the Virgin Mary. Because if you see here, if you look behind towards the back of this alleged human figure, you can actually see what looks like a veil. So it looks more like the Virgin Mary to me than it does to Jesus. But you're open to whatever it is you think you're seeing there. This made some headlines and then went away. Weird that the best reporting on this comes from the Daily Mail. Very hostile to anything even vaguely conservative. It could be that they're publishing this to kind of poke fun at Christians. Oh, look, you're seeing faces in the clouds again. Do you think you're seeing, biblical images when the guy next to you thinks he's seeing a bear in the clouds or a ship or a tank or something? Obviously, they're not going to defend the faith on this. But I'm going to go over this story with you anyway. And I'm going to show you why extreme skepticism up front may not be the best idea with this, just because it's a very strange thing. So we're going to go here, go over the details so you can see this. This story happened in the Philippines. So we go to the article, quote, "A crowd of churchgoers witnessed what many believe was a biblical sign as a cloud appeared to take the form of Jesus Christ in broad daylight. The remarkable sight was captured near the Basilica Minor of Our Lady of Penafrancia in the Philippines on June 14th. A crowd had gathered to worship ahead of National Youth Day in the country's Naga City when several parishioners spotted a cloud in the shape of a person standing upright. National Youth Day is a Filipino holiday celebrated on June 19th that emphasizes serving the community and country. As one of the attendees zoomed in, their video allowed those on social media to spot details like a head, long, wispy hair, legs, and an outstretched arm. Is it a sign? One person asked on X. For many in the Philippines, the well-timed sighting was absolutely a sign of divine presence. However, this may also be a case of pareidolia, a phenomenon that describes the tendency to perceive meaningful images in random or ambiguous visual patterns." End quote. Normally, in these kinds of stories, I do tend to think what you're seeing is probably that, pareidolia. Can barely pronounce the word, because we as human beings have the tendency to see patterns and familiar shapes, and including faces and all kinds of things. Classic example of this is the lady who finds what she thinks is the face of Jesus in a tortilla or in a potato chip or piece of bread or something, when in reality, it's just bread or tortilla or something else mundane, and our mind is seeing familiar images and faces where they aren't. And that could be the case here. We're going to get a closer look at this image here shortly, and you're going to see why in context. It's particularly peculiar. So we go back to the article here. Because again, there's the image that is most people are zooming in on. I've seen this on Facebook, saw this on Twitter, but it was always this picture. When there's a picture that better serves the point of this being possibly something to pay attention to as people of faith. And that's this picture here. I can't really do much better for zooming in, unfortunately. But if you look here, you'll see that it's literally the only cloud that has that upturned part in the shape of anything that could be considered human. The rest of them are just your very typical high altitude clouds of no concern one way or the other. And that is why that's particularly interesting. Let's go back to the article for some more details. Quote, example of this include people who see a face in a piece of toast or an animal in a cloud. Our minds are wired to recognize things we know, even if they're not really there. However, after the Jesus-shaped cloud went viral online, over 8,000 worshippers reportedly visited the site to honor the holy sign. Heaven touches earth in the most unexpected ways. A reminder that Christ is truly with us, even in the skies above, another believer posted on X. While many on social media have posted messages and Bible verses sharing their belief that the cloud was a heavenly sign, others voiced skepticism that it was really an image of Jesus. I believe in Jesus, but that's a cloud, one person wrote on X. It's just a cloud, and it looks more like Beyonce than Jesus, another user claimed. Meanwhile, some held on to their faith but kept an open mind about what the sign was trying to show the gathering of Filipino youth. I think it's an apparition, but not sure it's Jesus. Perhaps the Holy Mother Mary or an angel. I do believe cloud formations are often created and intentional, one believer posted Thursday. Then it goes into the science about all this stuff, yada, yada, yada. Including, in that slideshow that we took that picture from, other cloud formations that people have taken to be divine signs. Do with that what you want. But I'm curious, do you think that was a sign of any kind? I would caution people to be so dismissive of it just because it is in context so very strange. But also don't necessarily jump on it as absolutely sign from heaven. We live in a time where the overwhelming majority of people can't tell the difference anymore between artificially intelligence, meaning simulated intelligence, since those machines are not actually intelligent, but machines making fake pictures and fake videos and fake stories out of thin air and posting them on social media, and normal people seeing them and cannot tell the difference between fact and fiction. I'm not saying this is an AI-generated image. Clearly, there were a lot of people there, but it does speak to a kind of a larger problem, and that is something is off with all of our perception. So don't necessarily take it at face value, but be open to it. It might actually be real. And if that's the case, is that Jesus? Is that Mary? Is that something else? And maybe even if it's not real, if that was just a cloud, is it that bad of a thing that so many people suddenly are flocking to it? If it's causing more people to go to Mass, maybe it was a sign of a different kind. It is, after all, causing people to return to the sacraments, at least in small part. That cannot possibly be a bad thing. But I'm curious what you have to say about this, so let me know in the comments, please. So like and subscribe if you haven't. It certainly helps. Sharing this on social media helps too. And as always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.